Hi, Nick here from Pods with Nick and James. Just a quick one before we get into this podcast. I want to say a massive thank you for the support that we've received since starting these podcasts. We thoroughly enjoy it and we look forward to creating more. If you want to have your say on any topics that we've discussed or suggest future topics, then you can do so at www.reddit.com/r/Nick and James Pods. And if you want to support us, you can do so for from as little as £1 a month, and you can do that at www.patreon.com/pods with Nick and James. Anyway, back to the podcast.
Hello and welcome back to Pods with Nick and James. My name's Nick and this is James.
Hi there.
Today we're going to be discussing intelligence agencies. So what are your thoughts on intelligence agencies just from a blank canvas, from what you've heard through history or through your own lifetime? Do you agree with the need for them, or do you not really have an opinion?
Before the agency came the individual, and I mean, there's always been spies, even as far back as ancient history, and there's always been traitors, I guess, to the point where you know what, the fact that I'm even using words like that are incredibly judgmental, but we all think, or a popularizing character of spies is that they're cool and in control, but what they officially are professional liars. So it's kind of the moral quandary versus the kind of aesthetic, and I don't even know what the right word is here. Like the right, the
The glamification, the glorification, I suppose.
Yes, that's it. That's exactly the right word. I apologise, listeners.
Even if I did make it up.
No. That's what I was going for. That's exactly what I was going for.
Yeah.
So my understanding is there's always been spies. As the years have gone on, like individual nobles, individual monarchs have had spies in other people's courts. The idea of them being agencies and them all being organized together is terrifying. The fact that things like CIA agents have been used to destabilize countries, or at least, I remember stories. Hopefully, we'll go into some of those stories. I don't know. It's concerning. It's also really worrying that if we don't do this, what is the result other than the eventual result of like peace, trust, and love? Like what shit does the world need to go through
I think
if we start disarming spies?
I think the need comes out of the existence. So it's the same with like my belief behind armies. You need an army to protect yourself from the next army. It's the same with spies. You need an intelligence agency to protect you from the next intelligence agency. I mean, the intelligence agencies themselves would defend themselves and say the easiest form of defence is to know when things are going to happen. And for that, you need intelligence agencies and spies. But if there wasn't, um, if every nation wasn't cloak and dagger and full of deceit and deception, then the need for that would well, it wouldn't be there, would it?
No, no, that's it. But then again, are spies like in my mind, spies are better than massive armies, at least in that they are, um, well, okay, in that spies steal secrets and can, in some cases, ruin people's lives and can kill individuals. But I guess the one of the few redeeming features about it is it's still small scale.
Yeah,
You know, like it's not sending in a spy to infiltrate a certain government isn't the same as gassing a civilian population center or setting nuclear weapons off again. No, I'm not gonna. No, no, no. You know what? Fuck it. I'll say it. Or setting off nuclear weapons above two Japanese cities.
yeah,
Like, it's not great. It's not what I want. Definitely, it's definitely not how I believe politics should be uh, conducted. Yet it is what it is, and I think it's rather better to steal information um, than to directly kill.
yeah. I think there needs to be a better directive with some of it though, because stealing the information for the sake of stealing information is one thing. Um, the target should always be to save lives, in my opinion. If you're
Yeah, agreed.
going to use power, use it properly. Use it for the right reasons. Not for personal gain, not to get ahead of the competition, but to save lives. Anyway, do you know the. I'm going to ask a really obvious question here. Do you know the English intelligence agency, what that's called?
Right, so I know we've got MI, you've got the military police, and I know that you've got military intelligence. That's what the MI stands for. And I know it goes up in certain numbers. I know MI5, isn't MI5 the highest either agreed upon or the highest um public, for lack of a way of said it, acknowledged and publicized agency within the UK government, or does it go? Does the UK government admit the existence of MI6?
Well, it does admit the existence of MI6, but its operations aren't publicly disclosed. Um, so I think maybe that's where it goes. But you're right, MI6 is the name of our intelligence agency. Um, well, it's the top intelligence agency in the UK. Do you know what they started as?
I'm really tempted to come out with sarcastic answers here, and I apologise. This kind of just shows how tired I am.
There was an agency that
Um,
they were before they were the MI6.
yeah. Were they saboteurs? Like that would be the one that makes sense. Unfortunately, the first one that came to mind in my head
No,
were they bakers.
the direct precedent to MI6 was the Secret Service, Her Majesty's Secret Service, um, and or at least His Majesty's, I suppose His Majesty's Secret Service, and they were formed in or just coming up to the First World War as a means to gain intelligence on the growing German threat. It became an MI6 in 1912, and over the next 40 years has steadily evolved into the intelligence agency that you don't see today. There's a pun there for you.
That was well done.
Do you know, you said about it being glorified and glamorous. Do you know where it got that reputation from?
Well, I imagine like books.
Yeah,
I imagine the books. I hate to say it, the books of, was it Arthur Doyle or what? The I hate to say it. Was it originally glamified in the James Bond, or was it glamified, or was it like
absolutely.
glamorized way
Ian
before then?
Ian Fleming's specifically references MI6 in all of the James Bond films, even to the point where like he was so obsessed with the spy life of MI6 that there's so many different references throughout the book, such as M herself is in direct reference to C, who is the head of the MI6. C was originally Captain Sir Mansfield Smith Cumming, and he would always sign his documents in green ink with the letter C. And now all future heads since him, all the future heads of MI6 have signed all of their documentation with a green C. And that's one of the biggest references that Ian Fleming makes in the James Bond films. Is obviously M is C, which I thought was really cool. But you're right. The whole spy life. When you look into it more, it's very seedy and 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 backstabbing. But Ian Fleming made it a whole new ball game, world saving and martinis and bars and tuxedo events and stuff like that. Um, but it wasn't. It really isn't all like that. Um, one of MI6's greatest successes. Can you? I'll say what. I'll give you a hint. It was in the Second World War. One of their greatest successes came in the Second World War, um, and it is massively publicised. A lot of people do know about it. I wonder if you do.
Um, okay, so is it based off of? Well, no, it's not based off it. Was there a film about it
Absolutely, there was.
with
With
oh my
with
God,
the actor
with
with the best
Benedict Cumberbatch.
with the actor with the best name in the world. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, I love that in Doctor Strange there's two Benedicts,
Yeah,
like both Benedict Wong and Benedict Cumberbatch play but two of the main characters. Um, all right, well, yeah, so I guess that would be the cracking of the Enigma code.
yeah. The Imitation Game was the
Uh,
film
yeah.
starring Benedict Cumberbatch. Can you tell me who he played?
No, unfortunately, I don't know this individual, but I do know that, well, he had a very hard life, and yeah, there was still a lot of homophobia. Well, no, there was not. There was still. There was a lot of homophobia back then, and he ended up suffering as a result of it.
Absolutely. Despite the
Um,
fact that he created one of the first computers,
mm,
um, like automatic calculator, ever seen by man in
mm,
our generations, anyway. Um, his name's Alan Turing, and he had a team of cryptologists put together by MI6, and they cracked the Enigma code. Um, One of the most disappointing things, as is rightly outlined in the Imitation Game, is the fact that even when they solved the Enigma code, or when they cracked the Enigma code, they had to be very careful about how they used that information. Their knee-jerk response was to stop the first attack they intercepted, and that would have immediately given away to the Germans that their code was cracked. If you're going to use the intelligence, you have to use the intelligence intelligently.
mm.
Which was unfortunate, because then they had to listen to the fact that numerous people were going to die, and they knew about it and were choosing to do nothing about it.
Yeah, that's got to be. Yeah, and then also like every single letter of "I'm really sorry that uh, your child, your husband, your whatever died in this attack. The fault lies with the other side. Honestly, we could have done nothing about it."
Mm, yeah,
That makes that complete lie.
yeah, yeah, it does.
Um,
And I suppose the guilt is something that is, um, well, I can imagine it definitely stayed with the individuals that were the cryptologists that were on that team. Um, yeah, so the MI6 did have occasions of great success. There was another one. This one was a bit more spy kind of double agent, but they did stop world annihilation, so well worth an honourable mention. Um, they managed to place spies in the KGB, which was no mean feat, and in 1983, NATO was doing a war game exercise which imitated the escalation to DEFCON 1. They had everything. They had the Navy, they had the president present on the airship, on the aircraft carrier, and the idea was that it was going to be a reaction to the impending threat of like a nuclear attack from Russia, and like as I said, the plan was they were going to have high-ranking officials from all the NATO countries, and including the President of America, present in this war game. And if it wasn't for Oleg Gordievsky, who was a double agent for the KGB, it would have resulted in the Russians nuking the UN or NATO and all the countries associated with, because they saw the war game not as a war game but as a threat. And they thought it was a double bluff. They thought, oh yeah, they're saying it's a war game, but it's really an attack. So they stepped up theirs. But the problem was, even though the Russian intelligence was telling us, oh no, they mean business. They're gonna nuke you. The like MI6 and the CIA were like, no, 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 they'd never do that. They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't risk total world annihilation. And it was right at the last minute that, as I said, Oleg Gordievsky managed to get the right message through, and the NATO officials decided to step down the level of war game exercise they were doing, pull all the high-ranking officials and the president from any involvement with it, and that was enough to step down the Russian assault, the pending assault, which is terrifying, really.
Well, I had no idea things had gotten that close, but
It was during the height of the Cold
that is
War, wasn't it? So
fantastic.
there was, I suppose, in many ways, there was many occasions when, like the CIA and the MI6 felt massively under threat from the Russians during the Cold War, especially with the threat of nuclear warfare around every corner. I'm really surprised that no nukes were dropped at any point during the Cold War. Um, and I think that's one of the most terrifying things about the current situation over in Ukraine. Um, I know it's been going on for a number of years now, but things seem to be stepping up at the moment, don't they? Recent mentions of potential conscription by the UK populace um, if NATO decide to go against Russia, or start armed forces against Russia, which is terrifying.
Mm.
But yeah, so another occasion where the intelligence agencies have done their bit, I suppose, and have been necessary. But would you say they were necessary? Once again, if like absolutely in that occasion, if the intelligence agencies weren't involved, bad things would have happened. However, if armed forces weren't involved in the first place, and the threat of weaponry and whatnot else wasn't involved in the first place, is there really any need for them? Would it have got that bad? I don't think so, because it would have just been handbags at dawn and an argument with the Russians, and it would have been settled in a room over a glass of brandy instead.
Mm. Aye. You know what? We're going to need to do an episode on the Ukraine war at some point, but that's going to take a lot of research.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
just to make sure we got our facts there. Okay, well, I'm really glad to hear that intelligent agencies have stopped the breakout of war, and that is, I completely agree with you in that's the correct use of information gathering and the correct use of, uh, well, basically lying simply to make sure you've got your hands on the truth rather than telling the truth and then being fed
Lies.
misinformation.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, so that's, I will admit, that is something.
yeah.
Um, that's brilliant. Okay, so that's two times that MI6 has done something right. Can you name any times where either the CIA or the KGB have saved lives in the same manner?
So, finding information on the KGB is more difficult. And you would have thought, especially with their successes, they'd be a bit more outspoken, but they're not.
Hmm.
It's only when they cock up and there's investigations with other agencies around the world that there seems to be any information on them, which I think is entirely intentional on their part. Obviously, you can't stop information from getting out, but you want as little of it to go out as possible. Um, Meaning that it's likely to be only when, I mean, I suppose in their opinions, the two KGB stories that I've got were successes, but from the rest of the world, they certainly weren't. For example, I don't know if you remember this. It was in 1998. Were you alive then?
Yes.
You were alive then.
Yeah.
Um,
I hate to admit it. I was 10 years old. I was turning 11. I think they had just released Return of the Jedi, uh, or the CGI adaptation of the Star Wars film Return of the Jedi in 1998.
you know, I didn't know
Um,
it, but you are actually a year older than me. Anyway, Alexander
Oof.
Litvinenko. Do you remember him?
Oh, is that the guy who was uh fed right? Basically, they got some spies got into a cafe and were able to get him served some. Um, I know it was radioactive substance. I don't know
It's polonium 210.
polonium
They
210.
laced his teacup with polonium T10, polonium 210,
Hmm.
and managed to get him served tea, which gave him lethal polonium 210 induced acute radiation syndrome, the first ever count of. Um, and this was in reaction to himself and a number of other Russian intelligence officers that had been ordered to kill Boris Borisovsky. Russian names, who was a Russian businessman. They decided they weren't going to do it, and they spoke out about it. Um, he fled to the UK, where he then criticised Putin and the Russian government, and he worked for us and for the Spanish intelligence, giving information on the KGB and the Russian mafia. Um, and then, as I said, on the 1st of November, Litvinenko was poisoned in the cafe, and by the 23rd of November he was dead. And there's
Hmm.
been no admission, but there have been convictions. So Russia was charged with its involvement by the European Court of Human Rights in 2021. It took until 2021 um, for, and there was actually two people that were prosecuted.
Hmm. Okay, so that attack
As far as
in
the
our country.
KGB was concerned,
Okay.
it was a success. It's
Yeah.
it was only the second known assassination attempt in the UK by the KGB. Do you know the first one?
Hmm.
The first one was a Bulgarian dissident writer in 1970, Georgy Markov. He came to the UK, came to London, where he was, and this is the most James Bond-esque assassination that you'll ever hear of. He was stabbed with an umbrella tip on Waterloo Bridge. Inside the umbrella tip was a substance that caused his internal organs to start failing. He then stumbled into a hospital and said that I've been poisoned, I've been poisoned. All of the health officials at the hospital were like, there's no chance, no, absolutely not. Until he died, and then the head of the chief of medical decided that he would investigate and found a pinprick on the back of his leg, corroborating his assumptions. And Bulgaria was, despite the fact that they assumed that the attack was Bulgarian special intelligence, it was closely allied with the Soviet Union during the Cold War and just before the Cold War, and many assume heavy KGB involvement with that. And that was the first known occurrence of assassination in someone else's country.
Mm.
And it happened on English soil, UK soil. The KGB, what can I say? Very good at making bad things go away, making bad information go away.
Mm.
I mean, the
Wow.
KGB were heavily involved in the cover-ups, both just after the Chernobyl explosion and in the many years following the KGB, the Chernobyl explosion. In fact, a lot of the information that was finally found out about the Chernobyl disaster was found out by the passing of information from officials within Russia or within the Soviet Union and intelligence agencies around the world outside of. Absolutely unbelievable the amount that they tried to cover up. Did you know that the Chernobyl power plant, the amount of radiation that was poured into the surrounding area was 400 times that of Hiroshima?
That's terrifying, because I know the cancer rates in Hiroshima are still higher than the national average in Japan.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, there was a chance.
400. Just to
400
make
times,
that
and
400
it's not
times.
even as bad as it could have been, because there was as the reactor core was melting down, it began moving towards a water reservoir underneath the reactor 4, because essentially it was a meltdown of reactor 4 that caused the nuclear waste. The other 3 reactors, although damaged, were fine, and will continue to be used until I think 10-15 years after the fact. However, there was a molten core that was moving towards the water reservoir. Now, if it had have hit the water reservoir, it would have caused a steam explosion that would have damaged the other 4 reactors, and that would have been
A chain reaction.
I mean, it would have caused a chain reaction that humanity would not have survived. It would have been a miracle if humanity had come back from that.
Mm.
Like, the fallout would have reached, I think they think it would have covered 2/3 of the planet. And remember that radiation has a half-life of something like 500 years.
That's
Terrifying.
yeah.
Yep. And the KGB have worked very, very hard to cover up the shenanigans that took place. They knew that the reactors were faulty for years beforehand, and it just built up and built up. It was just cost cutting that caused the the reactor meltdown.
That's terrifying to think. I had heard that officials knew that they were faulty and that it was a kind of like a ticking time bomb. But like I've seen, well, I know that even in the last episode you discussed um, kind of negligent or willful negligence that you had experienced in the care industry. So it doesn't surprise me that kind of the thing that is always advertised as the big bad in the form of the Russian government would do something like that. But that's possibly my own prejudice there, which I'll need to look into. Ah, sorry.
It's all right.
Um, okay, so they've done KGB have covered stuff up, but they've also covered up if they do have times when they've had humanitarian successes, then they've also covered that up,
It would seem so, yeah,
which
because I can't find any
mm,
information on it. It strikes me that uh, they work less towards, especially when it involves other countries, they work less towards um, being the good guy and more towards um, being the bad guy, shall we say.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
I think you can't talk intelligence agencies without having a discussion about the CIA, really, can you?
Well, this is the big one. This is the one that we were leading towards. What I also find interesting is that you've got the CIA and then you've got the FBI.
Mm.
Now, I've got an assumption, but I was just wondering if you could correct this if this is wrong. Is the FBI mostly for internal affairs and the CIA looking at external affairs? Or do their jurisdictions overlap? And if their jurisdictions overlap, which one has precedence or which one takes precedence? Or is it a case by case thing where they literally have to battle it out,
So
therefore wasting.
as I understand it, the FBI are kind of like the president's policemen. If you think about it
Mm,
like that, um, they have superseding powers over state police. Yes, they're involved in some big things around the world, but they mainly keep it USA based, and it's normally matters of homeland security that they kind of investigate. They can be involved in the investigations within the state, within the Senate, within Parliament in America, and they can investigate agencies within the within the different areas of government. However, the Central Intelligence Agency is exactly that. It's its own agency, and it is centered around the gathering of intelligence, good or bad. They are the American spies.
okay. What are some of the what do they well what is known or advertised as the CIA's greatest successes? And I'll tell you what, like we I heard you gave a history of the so it was like Her Majesty's Secret Service was MI6.
Hmm.
What was the KGB's roots? Sorry to move it back because I want to hear the roots of the CIA, but I've just realised either you've told me and I've forgotten because I'm incredibly tired, or did we cover or did you cover the what were the roots of the KGB? Like, was there
So
a clear defined history, or is
not
that
that
also
not that we know of. We know they don't exist now. Um, they started, um, from what I understand, they started around um, the fall of Beria in June 1953.
Hmm.
However, um, I don't I don't know. There's so little information that we have surrounding like when they actually started. I know. Well, we assume that they don't exist now. I think they went with the fall of the Soviet Union, um, because they were. I think the Soviet Union's um, intelligence agency.
Okay. So. Hmm. All right. No, that's interesting. That's interesting. Okay. Well, since we've got that covered, what was the foundation of the CIA? Like, when did it originally come about?
It started around 1947, just after the Second World War. Um, and
Surprisingly late.
yeah, and it started with creating a special plane that would go on to do many historical feats, called the U-2 spy plane. Um, so it worked very closely in the development of the U-2 spy plane.
Hmm.
The U-2 spy plane was most famously used in the spotting of the Soviet bunkers within Cuba, that began the Cuban missile crisis in 1962. However, in more modern days, um, they they were the agency that set up the attack in Pakistan, which killed Osama bin Laden. Um, they in 1983, they also begun. Well, I think more than anything, there was a couple of points that I want to go into, um, which is more story time with Nick. However, um, they have throughout the years they've developed a couple of aircraft, spy aircraft that have been beyond the point of um, like nothing that we've seen before as far as intelligence goes. Like the U-2 spy plane was incredible for its time. I mean, just after the Second World War, the U-2 spy plane was a hyperjet which would not be picked up by radar, um, and it was an incredible craft that was used for the next like 30 to 40 years until the what do they call it? It looked like the Blackbird. Um, the A12.
Okay.
That was it.
Okay.
Um,
Right. Right. Right.
was replaced by the A12 in 90. I think 1990 was when the A12 took over. So it was
Hmm.
used for a long time, and the A12 is an incredible feat of engineering itself.
Hmm. Okay. No, that's a fair point. What can the A12 do?
It it it's a lot faster than the U2, and it is able to fly a lot higher and for a lot longer. The technology involved in the craft itself is probably um, where it excels, though. The sensors and the cameras and the ability to transmit data back was massively magnified in the A12. And I do believe there are unmanned versions of it as well,
Yeah. Right. Cool.
which is terrifying.
Well, yeah. All right. What are some of the major operations that the CIA has been involved with, and what would you? Okay, I guess we'll start with the bad and move on to the good. What were what are some of the least humane ones that they've been involved with?
I mean, okay, so I don't know if you know about this, but there's a project called MK Ultra. Have you ever heard of MK Ultra?
I have not heard of that particular project, no.
Okay, so this is a project that ran between 1953 and 1973, so it ran for about 20 years. And I've got to give you a bit of backstory before I can tell you about MK Ultra in its entirety. So during World War II, Nazi scientists experimented on Jewish prisoners of war to trying to develop a truth serum. They wanted to take the will of the person away with a drug in the hopes that they would be able to extract intelligence from them. Between 1945 and 1959, 1,600 German scientists were taken into the employment of the American government in a project they called Project Paperclip, forming things such as NASA, as well as joining high-ranking agencies, as well as the CIA. Now, MK Ultra was a continuation of the works begun in Germany. They began with hypnosis. They tried to remove the will of the human mind by hypnotizing people. They hoped to induce anxieties and regurgitate information in detail that was only picked up by the subconscious. So, like replay events from their lives, normally with high-ranking officials from other countries, in the hopes that they could piece together almost entire meetings instead of just getting dribs and drabs through paperwork. They moved on to using drugs in order to break the will of the human mind. They were using LSD, and later they would use things such as amphetamines, mescaline, psilocybin, scopolamine, alcohol, sodium pentothal. They had a technique which is possibly one of the most cruelest techniques that would ever be used on a human being, where they would inject a barbiturate or a sedative into one arm, and just as the subject was falling asleep, they would then inject amphetamines into the other arm and send their brain into a frenzy, a kind of hyper psycho state where the two drugs are working against each other. The incredible thing about MK Ultra is that they tested on over 150 people, all of which were American nationals.
Oh, shit. Okay, well, to be fair, like, still 150 people, even that in and of itself is bad. But for a government to do tests on, like, was there any kind of thing that made sense here? Like, was there any, I'm trying to think of the right way of putting this.
Rationale?
Yeah, was there any rationale? Were these like people that were
Like
these drug dealers that
murderers
they
or
were?
murderers,
Yeah,
rapists? No, no.
something like that.
Normally they were kidnapped from orphanages, or they were children that wouldn't be missed, and or adults that wouldn't be missed, and they would be taken away and tested upon for years, and then they would be released to asylums or into the general public with no sense of, like, they'd almost be like that homeless guy, that everybody kind of ignores. Um, Despite having been treated the way that they were. As a matter of fact, the government are paying damages to numerous Americans after being sued following the release of the documentation surrounding MK Ultra. So there is
Wow.
actually official documentation that backs all this up. This isn't just conspiracy. I mean, there are a number of conspiracies surrounding all of the agencies that I've discussed. But what I've tried to do is stick to what is documented as much as possible. And the fact that there's documentation that backs up what I'm saying here, is absolutely disgusting.
Mm.
Um, but it's not the craziest thing the Americans have ever done, or the CIA has ever done. I would
Okay,
say
what's the crate?
the craziest thing, the one of the craziest things that is documented, once again, like I said, it's important to remember that I try to stick to documented facts. Um, there was a project that ran called Project Gateway, and the Project Gateway was working on something called the Gateway process, and this process was thought to enable, wait for it, it's thought to enable individuals to convert their brain energy into a concentrated beam of energy which could transcend space-time. The aim was to access knowledge of the communal knowledge of the universe, and to talk to interdimensional beings and to travel through time.
I mean, it sounds like a terrible B movie.
It does, doesn't it? I
Like,
rather than give you a Nick-sized rundown of the gateway process, anybody that's really interested, check out the YouTube channel The Y Files. They've got a whole video on the gateway process, and he explains it so much better than I do. Him and Hecklefish explain it so much better than I do, and definitely deserves a shout out for this one. So go and check him out. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things that the CIA have done that you kind of sit there and scratch your head and go, but why would they do that?
mm,
It's an incredible thing. If it turned out that it was true, then amazing. But
yeah, that really is something.
yeah, I mean, there's the scientist that actually begun the gateway process, like the investigation into the gateway process, started as a skeptic. Started heavily as a skeptic, and towards the end begun to doubt his skepticism. However, he hadn't managed, to his own volition, hadn't managed to prove the gateway process was possible.
Mm.
Which is another mind-blowing fact. The fact that a complete skeptic went, you know what, fine, I'll investigate it. Started doing all these experiments and kind of went, uh, uh,
I buy this now.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe this is possible. I don't know. This is a bit crazy, man. Maybe he just
Mm.
started to see things that, not see things in kind of like a hallucinogenic way, but start to see things in his results that he can't explain, um, that maybe left him with more questions than answers. Um, but yeah, once again, CIA, incredible. Um, yeah, but as I said, one of their main successes was that they managed to find, locate, and kill Osama bin Laden following 9/11. So, high five.
Aye. Wow. Okay. Well, I've definitely learnt something.
So my question is, what are your thoughts? Do you do you feel the need for intelligence agencies?
Well, I'm really worried that if we don't have, then other people will do it. But could we not just have our agencies be, rather than meddling in the affairs of other countries, could we not just have agencies which are kind of along the lines of anti-terrorist agencies, but just kind of I don't know, spies.
I mean, a lot of what the MI6 does now
Mm.
is anti-terrorist. Um,
But is it within our own, I was thinking within our own borders,
yeah, I think
you know?
its main, I think its main scope of operations is within the UK. Um, and from what I
Mm.
understand, it doesn't um, employ the same high invasive techniques that um, the KGB or the CIA employ.
Yeah,
However, it's still invasive wherever it sees necessity. Um, and ultimately, the thing to remember is that spying is illegal. And spying, whether it be spying on your own country or spying internationally, it's illegal. And therefore, the agents that are spies,
are technically criminals. Is that what?
they're criminals, but as a result of being criminals from the get go, they employ any method necessary.
Mm.
In for a penny, in for a pound kind of thing, you know? Um,
Yeah,
like, I know James Bond has the license to kill. That's once again one of those fictional adaptations of Ian Fleming. Um, but the the general um, general meaning behind it is kind of like I said, in for a penny, in for a pound. What I'm doing is already illegal. I will employ any method necessary to do my job.
yeah,
You know, and that's even that in itself is terrifying, especially when you think about that being turned in on your own. Yes, anti-terrorist operations, but how do you mull out the non-terrorist? You can't get 100% success rate, so you're going to be invading the privacy of innocent people along the way.
mm. Yeah. Like there will be collateral damage,
Exactly.
regardless. Yeah, no,
Exactly. So you're going to do the wrong thing, no matter how much you try to do the right thing. Um, and I think that's the kind of the catch-22 that the government find themselves in. Um, like for the sake of the greater good, to coin a phrase, um, is it not the right decision? However, for the sake of the greater good, has been used as a means to um, motion, give motion to many of the world's greatest offences over the years.
yeah. The great for the greater good. God wills it. Any of that. Yeah.
So
Oy.
you can't justify the means by the end.
Hmm.
I had to take a second to think that through. I always get that mixed up.
Yeah. The or just the ends. Sorry, the ends don't justify the means.
Yeah. That definitely works better to say it that way, but I always mess it up.
No.
um, but yeah, I mean, I'm with you in the fact that like, um, I think you want to feel secure, don't you? And what intelligence agencies have the potential to provide you with is the one step ahead feeling of being secure, being
Yeah.
safe, because you know what's going to happen ahead of you. But you only need to know what's going to happen like ahead of you because the nations and the people around you are untrustworthy.
Which in itself is terrifying.
Mm. But such is the world we live in. A lot of silence following that. I
I
th-
don't know. I
it's a
don't know what
difficult
to
thing to
say.
follow. It's a difficult thing to
Yeah.
follow. I think it provokes more thought than it does um, speech, than it does to open discussion. you find yourself kind of arguing with yourself. Like there's so many arguments for and so many arguments against. It's difficult to pick a side, isn't it?
Well, it is like I can see the need, but you're right, the need exists because of historical, but also because of the continual use of spies that, or because of the use of,
Danger, risk,
um,
threat.
yeah, yeah, that's it.
The existence of threat causes the need for intelligence
Mm,
against those threats. Um, Surely the only real threat that we should be protecting ourselves from is that is out of our control as human beings, and that is, of course, Mother Nature itself and the happenings around the universe. We have no say in that in the grand scheme of things. But if a comet started heading towards the Earth, that's the kind of intelligence that I want forewarning against. You know,
mm,
if there's a means to predict when earthquakes are happening and save hundreds of thousands of lives, then that's what I want the intelligence to forewarn me of. I don't want to be having to look over my shoulder against people that are in the same boat that I am.
yeah, yeah,
It
yeah,
makes no sense.
mm, no, but then again, mankind throughout history has had no problem kind of creating its own disasters,
Its own
um,
issues, yeah.
despite the horrendousness of several, um, yeah, well, not several, despite almost unlimited terrible, horrible things throughout history, we still seem to feel the need to add to it, and
We can be
it is
such
ridiculous.
conceited people. Oh, it's okay,
Yeah.
this time will be different.
Mm,
And oh no, it wasn't caused by me, so it's not my problem. Um,
yeah. Yeah.
this is the world we live in. This is what's happening right now. We need to be responsible as human beings, as nations, as a world, and
Yeah.
take responsibility and take ownership. And you work together in order to overcome these problems that have been created by ourselves and by our predecessors,
Yeah.
and go past the mistakes of like older generations.
Yeah. Which in its, you know what? I'm literally lost for words. It's difficult. I always kind of feel or felt in the past I have strong views on things, but you know what? Just I honestly don't know. I don't know what to make of this. Like I feel I'm hoping that like a call back to honesty would be fantastic, but I don't think any government will take that seriously or
No, no, that's the thing,
will
isn't it?
abide it. Um,
Yeah. And the other thing, of course, is that you're made to feel so insignificant in yourself, like as an individual, that you kind of step away from wanting to make any change yourself because you're powerless. You're one person in amongst 8 billion others. So, like, what difference is the change that I make going to make in the world?
mm,
Um, and the reality of it is, in the grand scheme of things, probably not a lot. Which is why I always try to tell people, but knowing is the power. Knowing is the opportunity that you have. And as long as you act on that knowledge when an opportunity presents itself, then you've made your impact. You've done your bit.
yeah, yeah, that's entirely true.
Well, I think I'm going to round off there tonight, James, and listeners. Thank you once again, everybody, for being here with us and listening to another podcast. We look forward to joining you again next time. But for now, Take care.